Welcome to the Alain Elkann interviews, an unprecedented window into the minds of some of the most well-known and respected figures of the last 25 years.
Today is July 1st, and we are interviewing Christian Louboutin, and you are in Portugal today, right?
I'm in Portugal for the fourth month now.
It must be a strange experience for someone who travels all the time, right?
It's the first time ever since I started my company. I've never stayed in such a long time in one place, that's for sure. And I never slept in the same bed for more than a week. So it's the first time that, I'm going to Les 100 jours, as Napoleon.
When you were a child, you were getting leaflets from travel agency because you were planning great voyages. That was your dream when you were, what?
Well, basically, it's when I was on my way to my first lycée, college. So I was 11, 10 and a half, 11 and a half, 12, till the age of like 14, 15. That was a trajectory that I was doing. And on the way, yes, there was this travel agency. And at the time, the travel agency, you had those books. So I was coming back with the books of possibility of traveling, etc. But, it was combining hotels, everything combined, the plane, the thing. And that actually was one of my favorite games when I was a kid, because I was preparing. And it actually has been shaping very much, not the way I'm functioning, but the fact that I'm quite quick and I'm very good with calculations. Numbers, calculations, the two. I was, for instance, I have 2 months, and in those 2 months, I want to do 10 countries, and I'm going to go east and come back by doing the Tour du Monde. And so I was calculating, I was going in that specific place, and so I was putting 1 franc égale 0.tatata rubles or whatever it is, and then 1 ruble égale the amount in French, and so 1, 2, 3, all the way to 100, and then all the way to 500, and then 10,000 tatata. So I had an idea. So I've been becoming very good with calcul, with arithmetic, all these things, but calcul also. And so I was sort of traveling, imagining things.
Then you achieved your dream, right? Not only you became Louboutin shoes and gardens and whatever, but you also travel all over the world.
Yes, but the funny part is that I never thought that it was a dream. It was a game for me, and the game became a reality, which actually I realized much after that it was one of the games that I had as a kid. But as a kid, I was never projecting myself into an adult in a way. I liked the idea of traveling and things, but I was never thinking, okay, I want to do that. I want to achieve that. I've never been really good at projecting myself far. And even now, it's a friend of mine who told me one day, it's funny that you're telling me this story about this agency, because do you realize that it has become your life? And I had never thought about it. And I say, no, I had not. But yeah, actually now I totally understand that I've been quite close to my kid games. So my kid games, including traveling, for instance, that was really a big thing for me, but I never really thought I want to do that. It was almost enough for me to play that game. So it was a form of reality, which I enjoyed, and I didn't, I did not realize that it was a game that I was going to play and would become my life in a way.
And because of what you say, I'm going to ask you first this question. Is it true that if in your professional life, the only objective that you always had in mind was it should go well?
I never had a precise plan. And I'm always very impressed when people are projecting themselves. Unless, you are the head of a big company and you are driving so many people that you actually have to do projection and things. But on a personal meaning, on a just personal way, I have a hard time to imagine why, one has to project yourself in a long future, because so many things can happen in your path. So many things can happen to your story, to what's going to happen. How can you decide that, you should have a specific target and a specific trajectory? I think it's by nature, I'm one can say optimist, but more, I would say more happy than optimist, because sometimes I have some pessimism, but I would be a happy pessimist at the same time. So it's more happy. I have a happy nature. So I think that, I'm dedicated to the fact, or if I'm dedicated to few things, one is that things should go well. But going well doesn't mean, in terms of success or anything, but, it's more on a harmony point of view. So being happy is une chose harmonieuse.
And you also said many times that you have nothing to prove to anyone.
I was meaning by that I've been meeting a lot of people, and where the first important thing was for them was to prove to people that no, they were not this awful kid, or they were not this stupid adolescent, or they were not, they had to prove to their parents maybe, or to the older sister, to the older brother, that they were worth it. They've been sort of, a lot of people have been hurt in a childhood, and they sort of need to prove to the rest of the environment, of the world, or their family, that no, they are not that bad, they're not that stupid, and they're not that useless. And actually, I never had that in my family. I had a very, very easy family and very encouraging family. So I do things for, and I never do things against. And I see that there is a motto of a lot of people, and this is not a judgment, it's just a constatation, that a lot of people have to prove for other people. And but I don't have that. If I'm questioning myself, if I'm trying to find someone that would like to prove something about me, I'm not going to find anyone, really. And again, roots are coming most of the time from childhood. And so I don't remember anyone in my childhood where I would think I am going to show him or her this and that. I never had this thing. So it never became a motto.
When at the beginning of your career, you were the assistant of Roger Vivier, who at the time was a big man in the soulier business and whatever, you were not trying to prove him something?
No, when I worked for Roger, I was his secretary, I was his assistant, but not on a design point of view. I never drew any shoe under the name of Roger Vivier or for Roger. Never intended to. I was just very happy to surround, my work icon and my role model for work. And so when I worked for him, I was totally happy to be around him and to see him functioning, but not even drawing, because at the time he was 79 going to 80. It was his 80th birthday that we celebrated au Musée des Arts du Louvre, là, au Musée des Arts Décoratifs, au Musée des Arts de la Mode. I worked for his retrospective, but it was so interesting for me to see first someone that I was cherishing so much and that I admired so much, to see his way of thinking. And just by discussion, but often it is the way I'm drawing is through thinking of a discussion. But for instance, with the discussion of Roger, I was discovering why his design were his design, and because I understood his mentality. It's just like, I would give you an example. If you go in a garden, if you go in a beautiful garden, you can see, you will see the quality of the perspective, the design, and another, but it also will teach you something about the character of the person who commissioned or who designed the garden, the person who owns that garden. It speaks about a person. So when Roger was speaking, by talking to him, I could understand his design. And I knew his design by heart anyway. And my job was to make all the reference for the museum anyway. So what I've been learning is really the harmony between the personality of a character, such as Roger Vivier, and his design, the bridge between the two. So the reality, but the fact that it's not legitimate, the fact that it's, one is completely connected to the other one because it's an extraction. His mentality, his design was coming from the extraction of his mentality. The design were really representing who he was.
Is it true, or it's a legend, that you are rarely moved, that you're never anxious and never worried?
Well, never is probably too much of a big word, but really rarely. And again, I think that I have a double line in my personality, but it's not a schizophrenia, but it's a double line. I function. I do what I have to do. I enjoy what I do, etc. And then if there is a form of worrying or of anxiety, I don't notice it. It's sort of after that I can remember moment where I probably was nervous because, I remember suddenly conversation with people on the way I was with people. So I realized that during a specific period, I was probably anxious or nervous. But the moment I'm living in, the moment that I'm living, I'd never perceived my anxiety. It's really after that I can imagine, I probably was nervous or I probably was shy. Because I analyze how I was. But on a present mode, when I am in the present, no, I don't feel anxiety. Very, very rarely. I had this type of anxiety, I guess. I remember one day because I was so surprised that it was a Sunday and I was having tea with two friends of mine, and I say, something really weird happened, and I tried to describe my state of mind of the day before. And I say there was this friend called David and another one called Gérard Julien, and I say to David, we were at David's place, I say, I think c'est ce qu'on appelle le cafard. And they both laughed, and one of them said, but that's what I have every day. And they couldn't believe that it was like completely new to me to have this type of feeling. But it was a reality. It was really, I was so surprised to have this sort of saudade feeling a little bit sad, but not really understanding where it was coming from, etc. I never had those feelings, never.
And you have been frightened? Vous avez eu peur? Souvent, you were afraid?
I think I've been really lucky that on a very early age, something was telling me that it doesn't really make sense to be afraid. It doesn't make sense to put you barriers, etc. So first, it comes definitely from my family who didn't give me any barriers. But also, for instance, I remember, when I was a kid, I was like 10. I didn't like mustard because mustard was, when you're 10, it's strong for the nose. But I could see that every adult liked mustard. So I thought if adults like mustard and children don't like mustard, it just means that I'm a little bit too young for that. But mustard is not bad. I just don't like it. It's too strong. So I remember very well obliging me to put a lot of mustard on my steaks. So I was covering my steak of mustard. And then after like a while, I loved it. And now I love mustard. I kept on loving mustard also. So everything which looked a bit scary or I could be afraid of, as a game, I was definitely breaking that possibility. But there's been this really unconscious and very natural thing to me.
You said you were a good mathematician as a child, but you also have some pleasure, a habit to invent words. Sometimes in French, your mother language, you invent words. For instance, for distancing, you invented écartement.
J'ai pas entendu. Sure. And I think that it comes from the fact that I was dyslexic as a child. It's very strange, but I think that dyslexia, from what I see from people that I know who've been dyslexic, is a very good thing. Because dyslexia sort of obliges you to, first, it's in dyslexia, if you play with this dyslexia, you discover another world. And I was sometimes interrogating myself why I was inversing words, or if I had to write down things, I was jumping, I would say the first word, the second word, and then I would put the fourth word before the third word. And then I realized when I was rereading myself that it didn't make sense because I had inversed the order of the words. But immediately I was sort of taking like the cadavre exquis, this game where you put a word with another word and it doesn't really make sense. And actually, I always like this type of surrealistic thoughts because I think that once you start to analyze it, you discover something we speak about yourself. So it's a bit of an auto-analysis that I always liked. I was actually talking to a friend, for instance, not a while ago. We were talking about instinct. And I was saying to him that I really think that people overvalue instinct. And when I hear people saying, I just didn't like that person, my instinct was right. My instinct was telling me that this thing. I disagree. I think that instinct is an indicator. And so it's good to listen what your instinct is indicating you. But you have to analyze that. Otherwise, if you become prisoner of an instinct, first of all, this is the stage of an animal. And second, so I don't think it's good. I think we passed our épreuve to be a little bit no more just an animal. So I think instinct, for instance, it's important to hear it, but not to listen to it. For instance, there is a word, every time I have someone called Carol, for some reason, I discovered not such a long time ago that every Carol I've been meeting, I never liked. But the last Carol, I was saying, I just don't know why, but I don't really like that person. I don't trust that person. And saying that, I realized that in my childhood, there was a bitch who was called Carol and who was bullying me. And because of that, every Carol, actually, I sort of had a hard time. But if I had not analyzed the fact that it's coming from Carol Moko, which was her name, I would have thought, okay, my instinct says something about someone. It just says something about un prénom. The reality, I realized that it's just about a prénom.
To go back, we said écartement, distancing, and I asked a question apropos of distancing, or écartement if you prefer, as they say that you are never anxious and never worried. How did you face this time of coronavirus?
It's been very interesting. I was lucky and privileged enough to see it immediately, just like everyone, meaning just the beginning of March, a reality which was going to become a tough reality for everyone. So, but I've been lucky that I could leave immediately, arrive to where I am now, Portugal, by the seaside, and stay there. So that distance, again, sort of immediately, I thought it's going to be a moment where everyone is going to be polluted by, after like 2 weeks, I thought I can't have one more WhatsApp about this is this, but this is that, but this is it. You have to do that, you have to do I totally decided that I didn't want to be too polluted, especially at a moment where even the clear was getting sky. I didn't want to be polluted myself by all these fake analysis, paranoia, etc. I thought, okay, this is a moment where actually I'm taking my distance from everyone as one should do. Let's take a distance of what I'm doing, and let's take a distance also of my rhythm, my pace, and let's see. So first of all, I've been very blessed because I took my daughters, and I took the mother of my daughters too. So we were locked into a very nice place. To be short, it's been actually very interesting on many, 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 many ways. And I cannot say that it had to be redone. On a personal point of view, it actually was great because I took the time for the first time for years. I took another rhythm. I took the time. It was my first spring in one place, discovering the nature, the flowers, the beginnings, the roots, becoming a seed, et tout, So on a natural point of view, a nature point of view, it was fantastic. But even, again, it's easily, quickly, you realize that you are in a metaphor of a type of rebirth where you have to see what you want to keep from a very specific moment, what you want to keep, what brings you this moment, and what is the really downside of this moment. But again, I started by the upside instead of just seeing the downside. So I just think that the reality is going to be in September, where September is going to be difficult because this will not be anymore about, being tested, the hospital, the 12 days, and the quarantine, but it's going to be an economical now point of view, and an economical shock. This, I haven't yet understood what is going to be this aftermath.
Do you think that in your world, which is also the world of luxury, fashion, business, something will change? And if you think so, how do you imagine it will change?
And I think that what was incredibly interesting in that moment is the alignment of so many different elements. I'm going to talk of the fact to be locked, but how much the nature, sort of almost everywhere, was beautiful. no one ever had such a beautiful spring in most countries. So in general, you have ups and downs, but this spring has been from England to Italy to France to many, many countries. Let's say I'm talking of Europe, but even in America, etc., has been incredibly clément and beautiful. Almost like a sign of that nature, which we have to preserve, is pretty close to come back if we are careful. So first of all, I think that one element which has to see with the environment and the quality of where we live and the fact that we have to protect our Mother Earth, planet, etc., is definitely something which is not going to leave minds. I think that there is a younger generation than myself, being in the 50s. There is a younger generation who already understands the importance of keeping the planet safe and healthier, not the use of plastic, sustainability. But for instance, even for me, who understands it, but who never lived because of an emergency type of, agenda that I have, never really penché myself on the thing. Definitely it's on now. It's definitely fully on my agenda.
Is it going to change the nature of the business? I mean, are people going to spend a lot of money in expensive clothes or shoes?
What I think is going to change, because I think that what basically happened is that we started 2020 in 2020, and 4 months after, or let's say September, we arrive in 2025. I think that what did exactly is that beginning of pandemic is projecting the world into its own future. It almost, we crossed 5 years or 10 years in 3 months. For instance, the importance in the fashion world, you hear of the death of newspapers, magazines, etc., and the importance of internet, of delivery on internet, and but it still is about to arrive. Suddenly it arrived. So we did almost like a jump in the future, which was going to be our future. Just like, when you were hearing at one point, the emerging countries, meaning China, Brazil, India, etc. Well, at one point I had to say, stop saying emerging countries. These countries have emerged. There is a moment you have to accept that, the future you were talking about has become the present. I think that definitely people will be very, very conscious, much more conscious with everything which has to see with the environment. So, meaning if you're not careful in terms of your product, of giving back and being very careful on our nature, so you are going to have a problem, because now you have a customer who is conscious of all these things. And when you buy a luxury item, you also validate value of the company, of the name of the brand, etc. If you are not for the value of that company, or if you think that this company has no value, has no soul, you are not validating. And validating is voting. And voting is basically buying something. I think that the new generation are much more conscious of that for the brand, which is really bizarre, because a brand does not necessarily have to see with value outside their own fashion, system, but definitely it has
how was business during this time? I mean, people kept on buying shoes or bags of yours. You also do maquillage, beauty products, shoes and bags, and men's shoes, women. I mean, how did it go?
That's why I was saying, 2020 became 2025, is that suddenly online business has exploded. So let's say for me, for my company, we are not only an online company, but definitely our online has exploded. And so it means that people have continued to want to buy, to want to purchase, but it's all online. And even myself, for instance, who never bought almost anything online, I started to buy online, and I've been perfectly happy to buy online things. And so these type of habits are not going to leave, is going to stay, definitely.
But are you going to close your shops?
No. You have to reevaluate what you've been doing with your shops. And so there is every company has suffered at the end of the day. So you reevaluate the way your business was structured. And I have people for that. But for instance, even if I was totalement imperméable to TV, I didn't watch TV, etc. The only thing where I've been really keen on is the, George Floyd thing. I was very shocked by what happened. I'm talking of the death, but not what happened after, which I think is completely normal. And the reaction I'm talking about. But on the other side, yes, at the same time, this distance permits a company to reevaluate the way you were structured and to see if everything is there, to see what functions, to see what doesn't function, or to see what was okay, but you can live without it and probably you have to make a move. So, it almost made me think, but saying that, I know that it's a very privileged way of thinking or mentality. It almost made me think that it would be nice if every 4 years we had those 3 months where everything had to be stopped and you had to change your rhythm. So I know that it's almost, it's a totally utopist point of view, but I really thought that if every 4 years, almost like the Olympics, you had this moment where everything was stopping, maybe during the Olympics.
Maybe without people dying, that would be better. If we could stop without having hospitals and people dying.
Exactly. No, of course. Taking in consideration a lot of things which are right now during this pandemic terrible. But the fact to not to be always pressed on the same mechanism is something that I learned that it is possible. I think that for a lot of people, you realize that another way of living may be possible. Okay, so there's been a lot of there are a lot of problems. And again, the economical problem hasn't hit yet everyone, which are going to be hit, that's for sure. But there is definitely, to speak of that pandemic period, there is definitely so much to take off, so much to take and so much to keep. Of course, memory is short. And when you get caught back in your own machinery, it's a bit like, le premier de l'an, le first of the New Year resolution. You start with a new year with the resolution, and the percentage of the resolution, the bonne résolution, who is going to stay alive is never up to 100%. That's for sure.
So we understand this, and good news is that you, as usual, invented a word. The word is l'exhibitionniste in one word, but it's cut into words. L'exhibitioniste. In other words, There is a very big exhibition now that luckily reopened recently after the lockdown. It is an exhibition that you have created at the Palais de la Porte Dorée. If I'm not wrong, will hopefully last until January, right?
Exactly, till the day of my birthday, 7th of January. That's why I remember.
You said about this exhibition that it's not a retrospective, but rather a celebration of your 30 years of work. How did you design this exhibition, and can you describe what it is about?
Well, the exhibition takes place in a very important museum, in a very important place for me, because it's a place that I used. It was on the way to my school, to my college, le lycée Paul Valéry. And so I would see it literally every day. And so first of all, it's a magnificent building of 1931, designed by La Prade et tout. Très, très, très beau building. And so it really makes part of my childhood. And but also it's the first place probably that I remember very well where I started to travel. So before traveling in any other country, I really traveled through that museum, which used to be called at the time le Musée des Arts Océaniens et Africains, the Museum of African Art and Oceanic Art. So you have 3 levels, one ground level, which is huge, which is the biggest place for fish, so the biggest aquarium in Paris. So it's a set of aquariums, really, really, really beautiful, with, sharks, crocodiles. They even have an albino crocodile, which is very rare. I think you have like now 12 albino crocodile, which are referenced in the world. Beautiful. On dirait du plâtre. C'est très, très beau. And so you have all these animals. So this is the ground floor, the underground floor. And then you have two more floors. And so in those two floors, you had collections of African artifacts, artists, etc., and also oceanic artists and artifact artisanat. So when I was a kid, I would go there and I would adventure myself in that place and look at these objects, look at those textiles, at those heads, those wood pieces, those ornaments, those jewels, etc. And it was really bringing me to civilizations, to cultures that I didn't know. I sort of had a bit of a glimpse because of Tintin. And so Tintin was the first really character to make me travel. And then this museum was definitely the second one. But if you think of Tintin...
Tintin in English is Tintin, and it's a famous cartoon that was published in Belgium, I think, a designer called Hergé, and every child was reading the adventures of Tintin, spelled Tin, and Tintin was sort of journalist, traveler.
Tintin reporter, he's called. He's a news reporter with a little dog, Milou. But Tintin, it's interesting to see that Tintin, there's been Tintin on the moon, there's been Tintin au Mexique, there's been Tintin au je sais pas où, enfin, les temples du soleil, c'est au Pérou, there's been Tintin in China, there's been Tintin in Egypt, there's never been Tintin at the beach, for instance. You know, the thing of Tintin is that it was always linked to a civilization, a story, but he was never taking holidays. He was always looking at things, having adventure in interesting places. So for me, for instance, traveling, being completely linked to Tintin, traveling had to see with mystery, stories of people, buildings, architecture, expression of human sort, not really nature. You know, Tintin is never in the nature. When he's in the nature in Himalaya, it's because there is a Yeti. He has to find Chon, his young Chinese friend. He has to find him again because he's been captured. You know, so it's always a human figure that, you know. And so for me, I was very much like that from an early age because of Tintin and because of that museum. So this place is very, very important for me because it's really the first place where I traveled outside from Tintin. The first place I really traveled as a kid was that place. So I own a lot of things to that place. I questioned myself many, many, many times about this object. When I was a kid, I was like, what is that? And also, some names were very exotic to me and talking to me. There was, for instance, Haute Volta. There was some object coming from this African country called Haute Volta. But as a kid, Haute Volta was very like an image. It was very funny, that name for me. I was imagining like a type of roof of a volcano and everybody was living on the top. I was imagining a type of Kilimanjaro without knowing the Kilimanjaro, and it was very hot. So they were comme sur un chaudron, and when it was getting warmer, people started to go down hills. I mean, I was imagining and inventing stories due just to the phonetic of names.
But the exhibition you made, the layout that came out in a beautiful catalogue published by Rizzoli, which is more a book than a catalogue, you have chapters. I think that one of the first chapters is about the Brazilian architect Oscar Niemeyer, and then you talk about two fantastic women who are not very well known, but in the large public, Lynn Vautrin and Jamine Janet. Then you talk about Joseph Cornell, about Gilbert and George. Then there's a chapter on fetishes, then Helmut Newton, then Mia West, then Roger Vivier, as we heard. Then suddenly Wedgwood Porcelain, Andy Warhol, Marlene Dietrich, Tina Turner, and so on and so forth. I mean, this is a very eclectic story.
What happened is that when I decided to do this exhibition in that specific place, I thought of me as a kid being in that place and what I wanted. So I was talking to the curator, but also to the director of the place, Alain Elkann. I was telling her, as a child, it's been so important for me, this discovery of those pieces in that specific place. I would like, outside my work, I would like to propose to people who come to this exhibition this possibility to stroll into a beautiful place and seeing things unexpected, even unexpected on the exhibition that they are going to see. They see an exhibition which has to see with my work, which is dedicated to my work, and an artist, an handicraft who I've been working with, who I've been playing with. So that's the first part of the exhibition. But the second part of the exhibition is dedicated to people who's been inspiring me or to object who's been inspiring me. So things that I've been loving for a long time or sometimes less of a long time. But I wanted to put it outside the first context because I didn't think that it was normal I didn't want again to compare myself. You know, there is a shoe. Sometimes I'm thinking when I'm designing shoes, I'm thinking of, Alan Jones, for instance. Well, if I put the Alan Jones shoe, I mean, my illustration of the work of Alan Jones through my work next to a painting of Alan Jones, I have everything to lose because the Alan Jones painting are so extreme and so beautiful that my work looks really minor next to it. So I think it was more interesting to separate it and people can see the reference or not. And if they don't see it, but they like the painting, it's very good. And if they don't like the painting, they can see the next vitrine. It doesn't really matter. But I wanted to show that any type of work, creative work, there are a lot of elements of references which can come from songs, which can come from objects, from people, from painters, from artists, And then on all these sums, you transform them into your work. You ingest and you digest and it becomes your work. But it needed for me to be separated because I think it's nicer to see something that you have no idea that you are going to see instead of trying to explain, okay, Alan Jones is a painter who likes high heels and shapes, really curvy shapes. And I've been designing shoes the same way, etc. You know, you don't need to do that bridge. I think that if you bring people to appreciate things that they don't know, it's more than enough, you know. That was really my goal, but also to propose this to try to give the feeling to people who come to that place, the feeling that I had as a child when I was coming to that place.
Why do you like so much objects since you were a child? Since you bought a mirror in Morocco when you were a child, and are your shoes somehow objects? I read that the famous American writer who bought, I don't know how many hundreds of shoes, and when she goes to a shop of yours, she buys 80 pair of shoes, right? Who is she? What do they buy?
Well, you know, I think that people buy objects of desire because it's a reality. No one who arrives in a luxury stores of any sort, meaning ready-to-wear shoes, leather goods, etc., no one needs another pair of shoes as if otherwise they're not going to survive. You know, it's just has to see with desire. And so I think that shoes are definitely objects of desire. That's sort of how I perceive them. That's how I like to design them. So I like that they are perceived that way too. So yes, shoes are elements which are definitely, I mean, in my work, let's say, are completely linked to desire.
Visiting the exhibition Palais de la Porte Dorée, you invented, or at least you became famous for the stiletto heel, which means that you put heels back into women's shoes. And then later on, because of circumstances, you invented this famous red sole that is your landmark now, and that became the fil rouge of your collection, right? I mean, c'est un jeu de mots, mais the red sole became le fil rouge. You know, whatever shoes you make, for, Wedgwood or Helmut Newton or ballerina shoes or whatever, they have this red sole. You like that?
Yeah, I do. J'aime beaucoup l'idée du fil rouge. It's actually a surprise for myself to see that most of the thing, I'm talking again of the preparation of the exhibition. Most of the things that I like in a way are not necessarily connected, but through my work, they all have been connected. But also, if I think a little bit more, there is so many connections. Actually, it was really the work of the curator, Olivier Gabet, who was very good at saying there is so many things that don't look to have a link between themselves. But it's extremely easy, as a curator, he was saying, it's extremely easy it's by waves, you know, you go from one object which bring you to another object, and the color of this object is bringing you to something else. It's, you know, there is this feel, definitely. I mean, in the second part of the exhibition, there is this feel, and but it was almost like a surprise for me to see that, for instance, I always love birds, but I always love birds of paradise, and for me, dancers, showgirls, you know, from cabaret music halls they are girls and they are dancing on heels, but also there are exotic birds. There are elements of, you know, there are like birds of paradise. So, you know, I always love birds, but I love also something which is a representation of a bird, which is those women when they are dancing out on stage. So everything, it was very easy for him to go from one object to another. They don't look to have any type of siblingity together, but they do. I mean, he found them, and I was very, very excited to see this fil rouge getting developed in front of my eyes, thanks to the intelligence of the curator, Olivier Gabet.
In another time, at the beginning of your life, you had your first store or shop, I don't know, in a very beautiful passage, Dodin, which is a famous passage in Paris, and the legend says that your first client there was Princess Caroline of Monaco, and then many celebrities, you know, from Catherine Deneuve to Diane Furstenberg and others became your clients. This is, of course, part of your legend. But what I would like to know is two questions. If you have a type of woman in mind, and secondly, why women and maybe also men like so much shoes?
I think it's very different if you speak of women than if you speak of men. It's very, very, very different. Why women love shoes has nothing to see with why men love shoes. I think that the first difference is that, and that's why, for instance, there is this picture of Helmut Newton, which is nude, and it's called Nude by Helmut Newton, and it's a woman who is naked with shoes. But it's written nude. It's not written nudes with a shoe. If you have a nude in painting or a photograph, a man naked with shoes, it will say nude with shoes. The beautiful self-portrait of Lucian Freud, naked, holding his palette and shoes, it's called a nude with the shoes and a palette. So it means that it's an element which is not coming from your body, which is detached of your body, and it breaks or it moves the nudity. So you see, if you see a portrait of a man naked with shoes, it will say nude with shoes. Le nu aux souliers. If you see a woman naked with shoes, it will not necessarily say nude with shoes. Why? Because there is something in the woman's shoe which makes that it changes the body language, it changes the structure, it changes the gravity center, but it doesn't touch nudity. It enhances nudity, but it doesn't stain the nudity. A woman naked with shoes remains naked. A man naked with shoes looks funny in a way. So that's a first element which is completely defining for me the relationship to shoes with women and to shoes with men. You know, if you're naked I was naked this morning in the garden. I was naked. I was having shoes, and just wanted to pee outside the garden, and so I just put a pair of shoes, and I didn't bother to. So I was naked with shoes, and I definitely felt, it was 5 o'clock in the morning, but I definitely felt I would not like to be seen naked with those shoes on because I looked really goofy. If I was completely naked, I would not think that way. But naked with a pair of shoes, you look goofy for men. A woman naked with a pair of shoes doesn't look goofy, So it's really...
Why women like so much shoes?
Because it transforms their body language, but also it gives something. It gives a presence, and so through the presence of your shoe, I think that a lot of women feel the presence of their body. It gives them it gives a certain consciousness of your body. So maybe that's why the whole relationship with high heels, no high heels, exists. Is that maybe you don't want to be conscious of your body all day or all the time. So you're choosing your shoe according to that. Do you want to feel comfortable, or do you want to feel, let's say, attractive? That's a different story. That's going to give a definition. That's going to give a mission to your shoes, which is going to be different. And so definitely the relationship with women and their shoes is the fact that it's going to bring a small element is going to radiate into the entire body and change your posture. So if you change the posture, a physical change entraîne a mental change also, a mental perception. So I think that it's really, I know so many women, they start by their shoes. So it's not that they start by their shoes and because the color is so good on their skin or something like that, because they know they have these shoes, but they go into a state of mind. And definitely a shoe is the smallest element, which is going to give you an immediate state of mind, and you choose for it. That's why I think women love shoes.
Do you have a specific woman in mind when you still design all the shoes you produce by yourself?
I don't have a specific woman in mind because I was brought up with 3 sisters, and already I never thought that I had 3 sisters. I thought there was like 300 different characters entering those 3 sisters. Every time they were changing, and according to who was in the house, according to what was happening, according to the boyfriend, according to my father, according to whatever, there would be some change. And they were not lying or they were not playing. They were just different. I think that, every human being is different to whatever happens at every specific moment. We are all fragmented. We all have facetas, which is a small definition. We all are puzzles with different moments, states of mind, etc. So because of that, I never could understand even the idea of shrinking every woman to a woman, let's say, to have a muse in the fashion industry. I can't imagine shrinking in one woman so many women who themselves are already multiplicated by so many characters, making themselves who they are. So there is a lot of women in one woman. So it's complicated to put in one woman all these women who are many women in themselves all the time.
You were a time traveler in your mind. You had many women. If we go through your exhibition, we see that you are very, very eclectic. We said that there is one fil rouge with the red soul that distinguishes everything, them together. What about being French and Paris? Is it another kind of fil rouge? To be French and Paris, is it Paris and France, you?
I feel more Parisian than I feel French. So definitely Paris has an impact. I was born there anyway, raised there, and I always had an apartment there and always lived there. I still live there. I probably have a hard time to give a definition of what it is to be a Parisian. But I would just say that, yes, I definitely feel myself as a Parisian, even if I can add citizen of the world. I still feel very, very, very Parisian. And I love my city. And it's funny because I understand there are 2 cities that I like very much. And I think there is a type of triangulation of those 3 cities. And it's Paris, Rome, and Rio. And if you meet Carioca or if you meet Roman who lives there, they are absolutely in love with their city. But funny enough, Roman respect Parisians with all their defects. I'm talking of the Parisians. Carioca often love Paris and respect Parisians too, just like Parisians respect Romans and Carioca, because we have something in common, those three cities. We are really in love of our city, but it's a passionate thing with your city. So I understand the defect of Paris, I understand the defect of Parisian, etc. But at the end, that's the way it is, and there is a true form of independence of character to those three cities. But the most important is that they make you understand that you are probably very privileged, which goes with the downside of being privileged, but you're very privileged to be born and to be living in a city with such beauty. And I understand sometimes when Romans feel that, they look at some cities and people talking of places, and you can see that they do a smile like, okay, let's pretend that I think it's beautiful, but you do see that Romans are thinking, well, I'm not very impressed. And sometimes Parisians look very pretentious because we are not very impressed neither with, let's say, the supposedly beauty of New York. If you're Parisian, okay, yes, New York is a beautiful city. But if you're talking architecture, between the difference of centuries, between so many things, Paris is richer, But you feel bad to almost have this posture of superiority because your city is such a beautiful city. But that's the way it is. That's why I think, and Rio, which has a different history in terms of architecture, a younger history, has the same thing. People love Rio, love the architecture, love the penetration of nature in that incredible city, the penetration of the lagoon, etc. It's so we have those three cities have something in common. I would never fight with a Roman who says, dai, Roma è la più bella città del mondo. But I would definitely laugh if someone from London would tell me, London is the most beautiful city in the world. And, I would laugh just like Roman would laugh.
I hope British people will not be offended. There are two words, passion and curiosity. Are these two feelings still very strong after so many years of work and success? Where is your curiosity and your passion
my
going?
Curiosity and my passion is coming from the fact that my work is so vast and has permitted me to open my eyes to different things because, again, of traveling, but because also of meeting people, because of having conversation with unexpected people. And, so many surprises have been in the past. That's why it's important to not select yourself your mission and think, okay, that I should achieve this or whatever. Because, the sky is the limit if you don't give yourself a target. And so, yes, curiosity is still there because I don't think that I've seen enough of the world. I don't think that I've heard enough of interesting conversation, interesting topics said by people. I don't think I've seen so many things that I can sort of lie down and think, okay, I've seen enough. I have the same appetite for what I don't know, what can nourish my smile, what can nourish my mind, and everything which makes you alive. So I don't know if curiosity age has an impact. Age of maturity has an impact on curiosity. I don't think it's linked, actually. And the second one is passion. Well, there is in the exhibition, it's not the same word, parce que c'est désir, mais it's almost the same word for me. There is this square photograph of an artist, French photographer called Bernard Faucon. And there is this beautiful landscape. And there is this beautiful landscape. And in that landscape, he's been writing it's beautiful. I mean, you have to see it. It's really beautiful. There is those words which arrive in you imagine that you open a morning, you're sitting in front of one of the most beautiful landscapes you've seen. And next to that, you have this big sentence said in this landscape, à quoi ça ressemble la fin du désir? At what does look like the end of desire? I think that I always, the first time I saw that photograph, I was very moved because I think that it's not desire, which is it's such a key word for me, but it's more passion. It's true, which is not so far, but let's say there are some differences. And if I just change desire for passion, I could take back that word, à quoi ressemble la fin de la passion? And I still question myself about that. What does look like a life without a passion?
Well, you're lucky because you have a life with passion, but are you ready in September for a new chapter of your curiosity, of your passion? And are we going to see, besides your show, which is already there, and it's a voyage, an interesting voyage through your 30 years of work, are we going to see something new after this pandemic period? Are we going to see a new Christian Louboutin coming out?
I think that definitely this primaveration, because it's not hiver, so oui, cette primavération que j'ai eue keeps on, and now we started the summer, and I had the possibility to go back to Paris, but I realized that I'm not ready, and it has nothing to see with fear of germs or whatever, confinement. It's just that I really have appreciated that time where I can think, I have some distance, and I see everything as a sign that and I'm really not a mystical person at all, but I see as a sign that the fact that you had to stop your own rhythm, you had to be living according to a new pace, which is not your pace, but it's a general pace, and there is nothing you can do about it. I'm not ready to leave that pace, actually. I'm not ready to leave that pace because I think that I'm starting little by integrating things that I want to have when I come back, and I want me coming back, becoming a better person. So becoming a better person, and it's in a lot of ways, but also even in a professional way. Definitely, I want to be closer to a lot of things that I started to have in mind, but now I sort of had this time to decide that I was ready to go with not new direction, but to go in some direction that I have just effleuré, that I just touched.
My last question, because of what you said, is not much to do with this, but are you still going to put a red sole in your shoes?
Yes, because this is a trademark. There are a few things that I don't like to play with, very few things. But one is definitely the identity of my company, the identity of that trademark. This is staying where it is.
Many things will change, but not the red sole.
Exactly. When you sign what you say, when you sign what you do, don't change the signature. You can speak of different things, but you don't have to change the signature.
Alain Elkann interviews.